What's up, motherfuckers? Daid Anton is a player well known for his technique and for his positional play, and in this game he completely blew it. And so let's see the victory of him against Max Warmerdam in the European Team Chess Championship. Okay, David Anton goes with the white pieces and he opened with d4. He used to even play d4 or c4 more than kings open. Okay, he opened with d4, d5, c4, and Warmerdam entering in the queen gambit accepted. Knight f3, knight f6, 3 6, piece of c4, c5. I'm not going to pay so much focus in the opening because the most important part of the game was the endgame. So castle here, okay, knight c6 was another variation, knight 6, but they enter in a isolate pawn position, bishop b7, knight c3, sword castle, bishop f4, knight d7, knight d5, knight b6. All of this was normal, of course. White is slightly better, bishop g3. This was another way of development. b6 was slightly bad here. White have a small advantage for the bishop pair, rook c1, knight takes, rook e1, queen f6. And here, Anton can give the bishop and enter in this position with opposite color bishop, but with more development. Because, okay, white have the bishop pair, but the knight on d5 is a great defender. And you cannot eject this knight with a pawn, of course, because you have no pawns on c on e5. So in one moment you should take this knight on d5. Maybe can be in this start after bishop take rook c7, bishop e5, queen f3. This was a possibility. For example, rook e8, take takes and h3, or h6, h3, or h4, more or less. But Anton prefers to make that trading queen. I thought that Anton was a very good player in endgames, so he just go for the endgame. Queen e4, queen g6, takes, bishop g5, pawn takes e5. And many people think that the opposite color bishops are draw, and with rooks is more or less the same, but with rooks over the board, the position changes so much. And the people and the player who is putting the pressure have more options to take the full point with rooks over the board. So let's analyze the endgame that Anton plays because he plays very well. And let's analyze the Warmerdam mistakes. Okay, here Anton goes with rook e7. H4 or rook c7 was similarity more or less. For example, rook c7, bishop b5, h4, or h4 DLD. In general, the position are more or less similar. That we are going to read with rook e7. So this move doesn't matter so much, rook e7. Okay, bishop, you can move the bishop to some places, f5, e6, b5. But okay, Anton Warmerdam decide to move to e6, h4. Good move, taking space in the king side and giving a square for the king to avoid a rank checkmate. That we know that black now is not threatening checkmate, but in the future, in some lines, it's going to be useful, of course, to have the pawn on h4. So good move, taking space and giving a square for the king. Rook f8, good move, trading the most active rook of the opponent. Rook takes, and rook c7. And here, Warmerdam choose a bad move. He should decide between two things. He should decide between a passive defense with a passive defense with rook e8 or active defense giving a pawn but activating the rook. And he plays rook e8, a mistake. This move is so similar that a game between Magnus Carlsen and Daniel Duof that I'm going to analyze to the channel too, where Duof should make the same decision or place the rook passive and defend the pawn or give the pawn to activate the rook. And used to be better to activate the rook because a passive position is always going to be so difficult to defend. But if you have a pawn down, but the rook active, you is so strange that you are going to lose. Always the active rook used to be enough to defend a pawn down in the games. Okay, maybe you can lose, but I think that you have more possibilities to draw the game with the active rook and a pawn down than with the passive rook. For example, that's the showing line. Bishop f5, rook a7, rook e1, king e2, rook e1 attacking the pawn, rook b2 placing the rook attacking both pawns. You cannot. Well, okay, the a2 pawn is under attack. You cannot move the rook for the a5 because this pawn is going to be fall. It's going to fall. Sorry. and if you move the a pawn, the b3 pawn is hanging. So that's the best way to defend the position with black. So it's important to know how to put pressure in this position, but it's so important to know how to defend if you are in the side who have the different stacks. So Warmerdam plays rook a8, bad move, so passive. He thought that he can defend because they have the same pawns and there are bits of opposite color. But now we're going to see that I have some ideas of put black in some troubles. Okay, f3, good move, just limiting the bishop and giving f2, e3 to go to with his king. Bishop f5, good move, bishop f4. And here, Warmerdam start to just lose tempos, who wasn't the best. He just decided to be, yes, that doesn't make nothing and just lost tempos with the bishop. And he has some useful moves to make. For example, b5 here was a very good move. Just taking space in the king side and not allowing white to take the space, of course. For example, b5, bishop d2. Here a5 was a possibility, but this lane is more difficult to calculate. For example, rook c5, bishop d3, rook d5, bishop c4, rook c5, bishop a2, rook b5 and a4 was an option for black. But of course, here you can just simply play a6 and or bishop b1, a6, and black has no problems. So b5 here was a good move, avoiding that white takes space. Okay, he got with bishop f1 or bishop d3 here was another good option. The bishop here is good place trying to go to c4 in some length or to just defend the b5 pawn. Okay, bishop b1, a3, bishop d3, b3. And for the moment, okay, black is not playing bad. He just should play a5 followed by b5 and take the space. And in this position, I think that it's more difficult that black lost. Or f6. F6 is always it's going to be always a useful move in the same game. Looks like you are open your 7 rank, but uh, king with the king here is always going to be countered against bishop e5 or bishop d6 idea. So it was better to just place this bishop on f6 to control the white bishop a little bit. Instead of that, but a5, b5 was a very good way to defend. Instead of that, black plays bishop b1. Now here, I analyzed before a little bit because that's the move who says the computer. Bishop a2, rook b7, bishop b3, bishop b8, bishop c4, bishop a7, and after b5, I think that the machine says +1, but I don't know if white makes some achievement or not because now looks like black has a very good blockade on with the bishop on c4 and the pawn on b5 and on d5. So the machine that's the favorite line of the machine, but I don't believe so much in this line. But okay, a4. The plan of a4 is just bishop e2 would move. Now that's time to attack the pawns. Before bishop b3 could move, still attacking the pawn. Now forcing your opponents to trade one pair of pawns, takes. And here, Warmerdam makes another huge mistake, playing e6. We're going to see what happened after e6. The best move was black have two options. One f6, who is a little bit more complicated. Rook b7, bishop c4, and bishop b8, who is the white's idea. Here you have bishop a6. And if rook a7, just entering the rook segment, and just with rook b4, the game is a draw. Logical. But bishop c4, I think that is easier because after rook b7, you always have bishop a6, ejecting the rook from b7. And if white plays d4, trying to take space, you should make the useful move that I told before, f6. For example, bishop d6, and now you can place the pawn on like the square. And if king f2, you can finally put the rook active. So now the position looks to be a draw. That's probably the result. White is still pushing a little bit, but the position now looks like it's going to be a draw. But Warmerdam makes a huge mistake, a6, because just after rook b7, bishop a4 doesn't matter, or c4, he goes with c4. a4 was a little bit better, but black is losing to bishop b8. Now the rook is simply trapped. That's the problem of a6. I don't know if Warmerdam doesn't realize what is white plan, or I don't know. But bishop c4 looks so logical. Apart, you are stopping a6, so after rook b7, you will have bishop a6. So I don't know why he didn't play. bishop c4. Okay, a6, rook b7, good move, bishop c4. And now the rest is more or less easy for white. Now white is completely winning, and Anton shows a great technique. And he won in a easy, more or less easy way then. Bishop b8. Now the black rook is trapped. Play with a trap rook used to be bad. Okay, bishop b5. And just came with the king f2, king f8. For one repetition, taking some time in the clock and reaching the move 40 early. Another advice: when you are playing tournament with control in the move 40, if you are in the side who is pressing, or especially if you are in the side who have if you know that you have a winning position, uh, have more time should benefit you. So if you have a winning position and you are playing a game with control in the move 40, try to repeat twice to take more time. Okay, if you have 1 hour and you're going to have 1 minute, no, better try to play more moves in the time pressure of your opponent because you haven't time pressure. But in general, when more time benefits the player who have the advantage. Okay, bishop b8. Always when the advantage was +1 or more. If the advantage was small, sometimes can benefit the having less time can benefit the player who is pressing. Because the advantage is not enough to win in a good game player, but with some mistakes you can manage to convert. Okay, king f8, g4. Uh, of course Anton he can repeat again. G4, king e8, but now comes the move bishop e5, attacking g7. Rook c8. He just decide to move the rook because if you play here, I have rook takes d7. It's a winning position, and if you take the bishop, of course, the rook g8. So rook c8, and just after white takes this pawn, white is just winning because now white have an extra pawn, a more active rook because okay, both rooks are in the 7th rank, but the difference is that the white rook cuts the black king. So okay, instead of saying that white have an active rook, who is true, we're going to say that white have a better king. And apart the white bishop have very good squares on f6, on g5 is creating many problems, and the extra pawn is future pass pawn on the h5, who is so strong. But Anton doesn't need the pawn; he just checkmate his opponent. Rook c6, g5, holding the bishop, and now he implements a great plan to just make checkmate to Warmerdam. Rook c2, king f2, rook e8, rook c7, bishop c4, rook c8, king d7, rook h8, bishop d3, rook d8, attacking the king, should go here, bishop d7, and that's where he make the checkmate plan. That's a funny maneuver. Bishop d7, bishop f8, and okay, white is threatening rook d6, so he should leave the diagonal after rook e8. He just resigned. Very good game of because if bishop b5, now rook e7 is the following move. So very good technique in the endgame by David Anton. I really like this game, and I watching the game on live, and I remember the moment I think, oh, maybe he can take on d5 and try to push this position. And then I saw that he tried queens. I saw interesting position to push, but I suppose that black can manage to make a draw. But okay, the advantage is not too much, but the difference between Anton and Warmerdam in endgames are bigger. So that's why Anton makes the full point. I'm commenting and analyzing many games of the European Teams Championship. I'm going to give us the link if you're going to see the rest. Bye bye.